What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, and Carmen Vitali here with you once again to preview Week 14 in the NFL. Week 14. I know I feel like I've said this over the last couple of weeks, but it's crazy how far we have gotten to this point. Just a few more weeks of the regular season left before we get into the playoffs. This is truly the playoff push for a lot of teams, and it's sort of a draft push for other teams. There's always reason to care about something your NFL team is doing. So we're going to preview every single game of Week 14 here on this show. Carmen, how you doing? How was your holidays? How was your Thanksgiving? How was everything? And then how are you?
It was the first Thanksgiving in 3 years that I haven't been in Detroit for Thanksgiving. Weirdly enough, because the Bears played in Detroit for Thanksgiving, but this year it was just quiet and it was really nice. And we got a Popeyes turkey. So like, work smarter, not harder. Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. My fiance, for people that didn't see her clip that went around on the Paul Feinbaum show last week, notably does not like turkey. Turkey is one of her least favorite dinner meats, and obviously it's a centerpiece of Thanksgiving. You know, she's much more of a like, why are we doing the tradition thing? Why are we settling for a meat that we don't love just because it's tradition? And her thing's always like
turkey.
So do I. So that's the thing, is so do I.
I agree with Alyssa on most things, just in life as a general rule, but I can't get on board, man. Like, even like if turkey's done well, especially like the Bucks actually used to make this lemon pepper turkey for the players, and it like happened probably once or twice a month. And oh my God, I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't do anything else after I ate it, but like it was so good. I mean, the productivity went all the way down.
See, I also like it. And I use this, take to say, hey, nobody's perfect. I also align with Alyssa in basically everything other than, thinking that turkey is bad. And she always says like, why can't we just have like steak on Thanksgiving, right? Why don't we just go get steak? So to everybody out there, we got a steak too. We grilled a ribeye. We had turkey as well. So there were options. There's options at the Sikkema Lang household when Thanksgiving's going on. But hope everybody out there had a great Thanksgiving as well. Didn't mean to make you hungry again before we get into these games. Let's hit Thursday Night Football. Let's go back to, you mentioned Detroit. It's a good segue. Detroit Lions hosting Thursday Night Football once again. It was a special Thursday night that they were hosting, or not even a Thursday day game you mentioned against the Chicago Bears last week. Here they are a week later, once again playing on Thursday, this time against a different division foe in the Green Bay Packers. Packers, I'm going to be honest with you, Carmen. Feel like one of the more disrespected teams in the NFL right now, because
I agree.
Because the Lions obviously are at the top of that division. We're talking about them as a potential Super Bowl team. The Vikings and how surprising their season was, and them being right behind the Detroit Lions. People, okay, well, we talk about what a great surprise the Vikings are, and then people just go, Packers 9-3, cool, whatever. They're having a fantastic season, especially since Jordan Love has been healthy. So as we do for every single game, let's talk about a matchup that matters. Talk to me about this. If you got Packers thoughts, I'd love to hear them. But then let's segue into a matchup that matters here for Thursday night.
Yeah. No, it's with the Packers. It's just the drop off in interest in this team after everybody figured out last season that Jordan Love was it. They paid Jordan Love. It's like, all right, that's that. But in reality, the amount of adjustments that have needed to happen. I just skeeted it. Are we using skeet? I don't know if I should use that word. Blue Sky. I posted.
I was like,
people are calling them skeets.
I know.
Just derailing everything today. I'm sorry.
I was like, is this a Little John and the East Side Boys reference? Because if so, no, we probably can't use that. But a Blue Sky reference, yes, I think we can somehow do that.
I posted it on Blue Sky. I think it was Blue Sky. Maybe it was Twitter. But the Coach of the Year odds came out, and Matt LaFleur was nowhere on that list. And I was like, I'm not saying that he should win, but he should at least be one of the guys we're talking about for Coach of the Year, given all the adjustments they've had to do with Jordan Love's injuries and what he was able to do with Malik Willis, and sometimes in the middle of a game. Not to mention, I mean, Matt LaFleur made a coaching change this offseason, bringing in Jeff Hafley as defensive coordinator. That has worked out really, really well. It's just the whole operation there, which is captained by Matt LaFleur, is going very smoothly. And there's such a lack of interest in the team, though, because I think it's like business as usual. The Packers are good again. Meanwhile, they still have one of the youngest rosters in the league. And I don't know. I really do agree with you, though. I just think the Packers are getting a little bit disrespected, but I guarantee you the Lions are not doing the disrespecting because they understand exactly who this Packers team is. They are very familiar with them. The matchup that actually matters, and it's not my one that I wrote down, but the matchup that actually matters is Detroit versus their own health because the defense has gotten completely decimated. So it's Aaron Glenn trying to hide an ever-growing number of deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball. Deficiencies meaning just injury related. This is a phenomenal defense. They've been able to adjust to the loss of Aiden Hutchinson early in the season beautifully. They've been blitzing a lot. And we finally are kind of getting the answer to how Zadarius Smith fits into all of this trade deadline acquisition. And then they get him. And I think we were all wondering, all right, is he going to get the Aiden Hutchinson treatment where you're just kind of isolating him, trying to get him one-on-one matchups on the outside and kind of let that be your pressure package? Or are you going to continue doing what you did once Aiden Hutchinson went down, which is blitz the hell out of opponents? And we've seen Aaron Glenn blitz the hell out of opponents. So that's the matchup that matters because do you have the bodies to do that anymore? That's the big question. But I really do want to go to the opposite side of this to go more in depth on the Detroit receivers just against the Green Bay corners, who also have been dealing with their own set of injuries. And when you talk specifically about guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who lines up all over the offensive formation, fifth ranked PFF grade overall, 7 red zone touchdowns, which is tied for first with Terry McLaurin, 49 catches gaining a first down, also tied for first with Jamar Chase. And then you look at the receiving yards allowed in coverage by Packers corners and Eric Stokes, who is kind of their number one guy right now, especially with Jair Alexander going in and out of the lineup, 300 yards so far. So you've got kind of guys at and around 300 yards given up in coverage. And you're like, okay, how is this going to factor in? How are they going to match up with Detroit's offense, given that they can really hurt you in all levels of your defense as well? That's the thing. It's like they've got Sam Laporta underneath. They've got Jahmyr Gibbs underneath. And then you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown that can stretch the field. You got Jameson Williams that can really stretch the field.
Right.
That's kind of the matchup that I think is going to dictate how productive Detroit is and how much Green Bay is going to need to do to keep up with them.
Yeah, the plus factor for me is sort of a combination of however you view it. Is it a corner stepping up for Green Bay? Is it Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams themselves? Like somebody in that, I think, equation is the plus factor for me in this game. So I'm going to piggyback off of you there and kind of talk about that as my plus factor. But then when I think of the matchup that matters, normally we'll go one side of the ball versus the other, like an offensive line versus defensive line. You just mentioned a wide receiver group versus a corner. To me, the matchup that matters is Green Bay's offense versus Detroit's offense in the first half of this game, mainly in the first quarter, because I've been so impressed by the Packers and how well they have been able to start football games. Over the last month, the Packers are 5th in offensive grade in the first half. They are 1st in rushing grade in the first half, and they are 4th in points scored in the first half over the last 3 games. So 4th, that means that they're very high up on that list. The Detroit Lions, they are number 1. So these are teams, just a little bit higher. So these are 2 teams that know exactly what they want to do. And there is sort of an established identity at this point between these teams. And yet the other teams can't stop it. They're able to come out of the gate, especially on the ground. That's what I love about the Packers, how they're feeding Josh Jacobs and getting the run game involved. These 2 teams in particular have been very good over the last 4 or 5 games of dictating how the game is played. Because when you can come out and score, I don't want to say at will, but as high of a clip as the Packers and the Lions are, you dictate the tempo of the game. You put the other team on their heels. You force them to be the ones that are reacting to you. Okay, now if you're the other team, now we're down on the scoreboard. Does that mean we can't run as much? Does that mean we have to open it up a little bit sooner? Are we abandoning the run earlier than we want to? And yet the Packers and the Lions, they're able to really hit you in the mouth and just play exactly what their game is. These are 2 teams that don't get uncomfortable very often in the first half. Now they're going up against one another. So to me, it's a huge matchup that matters. Who can still start fast in this game? Or maybe it's an answer of both. Are we going to see a fireworks show in the first half? To me, that's really something to look out for. But who's the plus factor for you in this one?
Yeah, I mean, and not to mention too, both of these coaches are so good at making halftime adjustments. I mean, Dan Campbell, obviously kind of the CEO head coach, but like Ben Johnson, really, really good at evolving his scheme in the second half, and making sure that they understand exactly what their opponents are going to do and trying to stay one step ahead of them, which is why they're productive pretty much all game long. And Green Bay's rushing offense, I can't say enough about. It's not even particularly Josh Jacobs, although obviously he's the engine of the rushing offense. But it's that ever since their bye week, Green Bay hasn't had a lot of tendencies in their run game. They're running different run schemes every game, it seems like. When coming out of the bye against the Bears, I think I said this last week, tons of duo, almost like exclusively duo in the run game. And then you look at a week, 2 weeks later, they're not running duo like that, or if at all. And so you're kind of matching your run scheme to what your opponent can do well or doesn't do well, rather, and trying to exploit that matchup, which again is another kind of emphasis on Matt LaFleur being coach of the year because of just all of these adjustments that are happening as the season goes on. My plus factor, though, is something that I noticed when a huge narrative, I think, around Jordan Love is that, all right, he's kind of this Brett Favre. He's got the Green Goblin mask on his shoulder. Like, he wants to take risks. And it's something that Matt LaFleur has addressed, saying we're not going to coach that out of him because a lot of times those risks pay off, right? So he has this like kind of gunslinger, high risk, high reward player reputation. And yet, I looked at the numbers. They don't support that at all. 13 turnover-worthy plays this season. That ties him with guys like Josh Allen and Jared Goff. Jared Goff, yes, he has interception game, but outside of that has been very good at taking care of the football this year. 3.7% turnover worthy play percentage for Jordan Love. That ranks as like middle of the pack, 14th. So he's kind of like middle of the pack around quarterbacks. He's also suffered the third most drops of any quarterback from this receiver core. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he wasn't consistently in the lineup, especially early, didn't really establish the rapport with his receivers again this season until later. And now you're seeing some of those drops kind of, the number is dwindling as the season goes on and they're all more comfortable with each other. They've got a feel for the timing of everything, all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of this, and something that we haven't been giving a lot of credence to, is that his receivers are dropping catchable passes. And that's sometimes working in, like, I think there was a lot made about, especially early on, his interceptions were not his fault, at least a majority of them. They were either deflected, they were tipped, his receiver fell down, he didn't run the right route, that, and the other, where, yes, that shows up as an interception for Jordan Love, but it's not that it was a turnover-worthy play or that Jordan Love was putting the ball in harm's way. It was his receivers weren't there when he was expecting them to be there. And Jordan Love is so good at throwing with anticipation and trusting his guys. And now that, again, they've had more reps together with Jordan Love back in the lineup and healthy, this is when it's starting to pay off. But up until this point, I feel like he's gotten this reputation that he hasn't really deserved.
He is truly, I think the positives of being a gunslinger are certainly there for Jordan Love. But I just, going back to our point of how we started this whole conversation, I just don't think the Packers are getting enough credit for what they're doing right now. Maybe people out there think differently, and I just haven't seen enough talk about the Packers, but certainly there's going to be no escaping it with these two divisional teams going up against each other on Thursday Night Football. And this is a huge game, right? I imagine what happens if Green Bay wins this game in Detroit.
Yes.
I mean, it vaults them to, okay, now,
seed.
All of a sudden they're a 10-win team, and the Detroit Lions drop a game, and now they're within, the Vikings and the Packers are then well within reach of not just winning the division, not just catching the Lions, but the number one overall seed. So for a lot of talk of like, the Lions are playing fantastic, they're going to make the Super Bowl. Obviously they can, and they're a phenomenal football team, but the margin for error is still very small because of how well these other two teams are playing within the division. And I want to make sure the Packers get that love. So very excited for this game.
You add in the Eagles to that too. Yeah, Detroit wins.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They clinch They clinch a playoff berth. Detroit wins this. They clinch the playoffs. They're good. But you're right. The margin for error, for as dominant as Detroit has looked at parts of this season, they are not a lock for the number one overall seed. And like, you contrast that with the AFC too, where the AFC is all but locked up at this point. It's completely different in the NFC, and the Lions really have zero margin for error and have to continue to win to secure that home field advantage and the first round bye.
Okay, so moving on to the 1 p.m. games, Jets and Dolphins. Matchup that matters here. What do you got, Carmen?
Yeah, I think it has to involve somebody again that we're not talking enough about. Nick Westbrook,
Ikine.
Ikine. I should have known that. I actually have a friend with a last name that he says it Ekine, so that's why I think I. Anyway,
I've only heard it a million times because I watch Red Zone and he scored like in 8 games in a row.
that's what
And
I'm
so
saying.
I've just heard Scott Hansen say Nick Westbrook
Yeah,
Ikine every single
Ikine.
week. It's appointment naming.
I know. I need to have Red Zone up. I don't usually have Red Zone up. I just have my 4 box, and then I go back and I watch all the games. I need to have Red Zone up on my laptop while I'm watching the quad box. Anyway, NWI, Nicky boy. It's become death taxes and a touchdown by Nick. Like that's the whole thing that I feel like everybody wised up to, especially this past week if you were scrolling social media. So it's him and against these Jacksonville corners, his receiving stats since week 6, 20 catches for 365 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, which is tied for first with Jamar Chase in that span, 8 contested catches, that's tied for 13th in that span. And the Jags have allowed the second most passing yards with 3,434 this season. So this has not been a unit that has been able to kind of stifle the bleeding when it comes to going against this Jacksonville defense. And there's not a whole lot working for the Jaguars right now. And this is going to be something that I think that that these Titans can take advantage of.
I was so busy excited talking about Nick Westbrook-Ikine and us talking about him scoring touchdowns that I realized I said Jets Dolphins as the game, but this is Jaguars Titans. That was actually where it was in the rundown. So that's my bad. I should have said Jags Titans. You were following the rundown as it was corrected. So we're talking about Jags Titans, just so everybody is clear. So that is her point, obviously, on the matchup that matters there. My point for Jags Titans, just to make sure everybody's clear once again, Titans offensive tackles versus the Jags edge rushers. Trevor Walker, sneaky 8 sacks this season. Josh Hines-Allen getting a lot more attention when it comes to the offensive lines, dealing with the better offensive linemen or the chips or the extra blocks, the extra looks, whatever it is from running backs, tight ends. So they're paying more attention to Josh Hines-Allen. Josh Hines-Allen does have a higher pass rushing grade than Trayvon Walker does, despite the fact that Walker has 8 sacks and Josh Hines-Allen has 6.5. But this is a formidable edge rushing duo, and they're going up against an offensive tackle duo with Nicholas Petit-Frere and J.C. Latham that are struggling with the Tennessee Titans. And so this is an area where I really feel like the Jags can take advantage. The Titans offensive tackles this season, 55.5 overall blocking grade. That's 31st in the NFL, and 54.2 pass blocking grade in particular, which is 30th. So it's just this should be advantage Jacksonville. It really should. You should be able to get in Will Levis's face, pressure him a little bit, at least hurry some throws, maybe some QB hits, maybe some stacks. I know that sometimes the pressure doesn't always lead to those, but disruption. It should be a big disruption day for Jacksonville's defensive line, particularly against these offensive tackles that have struggled for Tennessee. So they got to hold up better against a duo that, again, doesn't really get talked about enough, I think, and one that's playing pretty well down the stretch here. So that's my matchup that matters. But what do you have as your plus factor here for this game?
Yeah, it goes right along with that. And it's both Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen and kind of who can affect Will Levis more. We know that he's prone to turnover-worthy plays, speaking of. And what's interesting, though, is you look at kind of the pass rush win rate of these guys and the pressure rate. Trayvon Walker, yes, sneaky amount of sacks this year, just 12.2% pass rush win rate percentage, though. So that's something that kind of drops off. Either he gets a sack or he doesn't get pressure. It's feast or famine for him. And then you look at Josh Hines-Allen, who leads the Jags in pressures with 48, 18.3% pass rush win percentage. That ranks 12th in the league, so slightly better. And then 15.5% pressure rate, that ranks 16th. So better, but still kind of mid-range. And you really think that this is an opportunity against this Titans offensive line to really affect the game and kind of come out on the winning side of it if you're the Jags defense. I have to think that those guys are the ultimate plus factor.
Yeah, plus factor for me is Levis. It feels like it's sort of an obvious here. I think that the run game with Tennessee, obviously, that's how they want to establish things. They want to make sure that they're balanced, but it's always Levis is sort of the plus factor here. You mentioned Nick Westbrook-Ikine, who I think is the plus factor certainly when it comes to the passing attack. They were wondering, okay, who's going to step up with DeAndre Hopkins now gone? Very clearly, it is Westbrook-Ikine, but just Levis overall. The Jags have allowed the second most passing yards in the NFL, and so this is sort of a ripe matchup now. Going back to how we were talking about things with Jordan Love, having the devil on his shoulder, we know that has been the case with Will Levis so far this season. But since he has come back from injury and been reinserted into the starting lineup, he is following along with Bryce Young, with Anthony Richardson, playing better, playing more in control, or at least I should say playing less reckless. This is an opportunity where he will have the chances to really push the ball deep down the field. Does he take that a little bit too far? I'm interested to see, because it should be a good matchup for him to play very well, because when it comes to those deep shots, throws of 20 or more yards, 8 completions this season since week 10, that's tied for second in the NFL, 361 yards, that is first, and he is tied with Russell Wilson in touchdowns. He's got 4 when throwing the ball 20 yards or more. So this is a Will Levis type of a game. This is sort of a why you drafted Will Levis type of a game. Do we see the best version of him more than we do the reckless version of him that we saw earlier this year and even going back into last year? That is something that I'm looking for, because if that's the case, I think the Titans win this one. I think that they're going to be able to win it.
Did you see, I don't know who posted it on social media, but it was like, it blew my mind. It was, okay, the Pokemon, like, evolution,
of
like,
course,
Charmander,
yes,
to what, I forget what the middle one's name is, to Charizard. Like,
yes.
So it's like, it's the 3. And it's like, Charmander is Will Levis. The middle one is Jameis Winston, and then Charizard is Jordan Love, which again is not really the case with Jordan Love.
I mean, it kind of is. It's just the best version of it. It's just the best version of it. That was JP Acosta who
was it
tweeted
JP?
that out.
I wasn't confident it was JP, but
it was
right,
JP, who's a fantastic football follow. You should follow him. He does a great job covering everything, including the NFL draft as well. So with the season ending, everybody should follow JP. He's fantastic. But it was a brilliant tweet. I loved it as well. It was a bravo golf clap to him there for a fantastic tweet. Not going to call it a skeet. I'm just not going to do that because I saw it on Twitter, so I'm not going to call it that. Okay, now
let's get to Jets Dolphins.
Now let's get to Jets Dolphins. Correctly on the show sheet here. 1:00 game, divisional game, obviously. Matchup that matters here. This one's back in Miami, so back in the warmth here for the Dolphins. Don't have to talk about the cold weather games because Charlotte now was in Cincinnati earlier this week. Man, it's cold. It's cold around the country right now for the early parts of December. They don't have to worry about that being in Miami this week, even if it is a little bit more chilly than it is normally. What do you think about this game? No temperature issues involved. What's the matchup that matters?
Yeah, I know. It's something that, like, when you talk about the temperature stuff with the Dolphins, my first inclination is to be like, it's overblown. But, like, it's really not.
Unfortunately, it's not.
It's not.
I wish it was overblown.
I really know. Do. It's wild to think that, like, an NFL team where there's so much movement and coaches go from place to place and all this other stuff, like, that can be a factor. Because it's like you could just as easily be traded to Buffalo if you're a player, or, like, as a coach, McDaniel was in Washington. It gets cold there. Like, you haven't figured out how to, like, adjust for stuff like this. It blows my mind that this is really an issue, but it has been for the Dolphins. You're right. This week it won't. So are we going to get some of the production back and get more of the high-flying offense between Tua and Tyreek Hill in particular? And then what's that going to look like against a guy like Sauce Gardner? So I'm looking at that matchup in particular, Tyreek Hill, Sauce Gardner, who gets the better of each other now that they're back in the warmth and your joints are all lubricated and warmed up and whatever it is that keeps this Dolphins offense completely limited in cold weather. So I really want to see Sauce Gardner in coverage, 372 snaps this year, 24 catches allowed for 382 yards. So 24 catches on 372 snaps. Great. 1 touchdown allowed, 14 catches allowed for a first down, 10 forced incompletions. So he's been playing well. Again, very few bright spots for this Jets team. Sauce Gardner's one of them. Can you then limit Tyreek Hill, who has 17 catches, gaining 15 or more yards, which is actually not leading the Dolphins, by the way, because Jalen Waddle has 19. But you still kind of respect Tyreek Hill as the number one guy you need to shut down in this Dolphins offense. And again, they haven't really been able to, at least not to the degree they had it last year, get the run game going, which is also another kind of baffling thing about this Miami offense this year. So if you can take away some of their deep passing, these explosive plays that they can get through the air, they don't really have a lot to fall back on otherwise. So that's kind of, I think, a key to limiting this Dolphins team if you're the Jets. But
yeah, Tyreek Hill, unfortunately for the Miami Dolphins, now I understand, like, it wasn't an ideal start to the beginning of the year. Tua gets hurt. I mean, there are things that are involved here that definitely go into these statistics that I'm going to read. But I talked about this on the review show earlier this week on Monday. Tyreek Hill is more of an in-theory player than an actual production player at this point, specifically
good way to put it.
When it comes to first half production. I was floored at how they are not able to get Tyreek Hill the football, or at least get him the football in advantageous situations, because they give him screens. But listen to these numbers. Anybody listen on Monday, these are sort of the same numbers, because I think it's a really important point for this game as well. If you just look at the first 13 games of the season, Tyreek Hill in 2023, he had 971 yards and a 4.71 yards per route run average through the first 13 weeks. The next year, he had 617 yards and a 2.74 yards per route run average. This year, through 13 games in the first half, he only has 251 total receiving yards through 13 weeks, 13 first halves. He only has 251 receiving yards compared to over 600 last year and over 900 the year before. That's crazy. They're not able to get...
That's also wild, because like on the year, he has 227 yards after the catch, which makes up like an overwhelming then amount of his receiving yards.
They cannot get him the ball in the first half. They just cannot get him the ball in the first half, and it continues to be an issue, and it's going to be a major issue. And I wonder if they can get it fixed here this week, because you mentioned Sauce Gardner. Don't think he's a bad football player at all whatsoever, but the Jets corners have struggled this season. So I wonder if this is sort of the get right game for them. Situational football, I think, matters a lot for this. Shout out to Dave Salfaro, who helped us get this by researching a lot of these numbers here. Third and fourth down conversions for these teams. It really is two teams that are sort of middle of the pack, more second half of, like, lower half of the NFL. Jets on third down conversions and fourth down conversions, they're 21st in the NFL at 39.5%. Dolphins just 39.9. They're 17th in the NFL. Then it comes to red zone efficiency. Jets 51.3% in the red zone. So when we talk about success in the red zone, it's not just scoring a field goal. It's exclusively scoring a touchdown once you get in the red zone. So they do that 51.3% of the time, which is tied for 22nd. Dolphins right around that number as well, 53.8%, tied for 17th. So both of these teams, very similar to each other in how they convert third and fourth downs, how they convert in the red zone. Those are normally true X factors of, like, well, who converted in the red zone? Well, who was better on third down? With both of these teams being as even as they are, whoever sort of comes out on top, I think, in one of those two categories, maybe both of those categories, to me, ends up winning this football game. So situational football, to me, is the matchup that matters between these two offenses. What's a plus factor you got for this game?
Yeah, that was my plus factor, was the situational football. And then if you go even further and talk about goal-to-go situations, the Jets actually have the edge. They're top 10 in goal-to-go percentage and converting into a touchdown, which makes sense. I think 80% every time they get inside the 10-yard line, they end up with a touchdown, which again is what you should do. But then the Dolphins, they rank 22nd in the league at just 69.57% in goal-to-go situations, which is just really, for the amount of weapons that you have, and you have Tua back now. I mean, these are season totals, so I'm sure it's gotten a little bit better since Tua's been back in the lineup, but there's no excuse to go up and down the field and then not be able to punch it in, especially from inside the 10. So that's where the scoring production comes in. That's where this all ends up mattering. And you're right, both of these teams are kind of lower first half of the league, if not downright like bottom third in some of these cases. And that's kind of going to be the difference here.
Chop Robinson's the plus factor for me for the for the Miami Dolphins, because Dalton did a great job of pointing this out when we were doing the review show this past Monday. Chop Robinson's he's been sort of thrusted in the lineup as a rookie because he's really needed to. Jalen Phillips goes out for the year. Bradley Chubb is still not back. They really need somebody to be a big-time edge rusher for them. Zach Seidler and Calais Campbell have been great on the interior, but who's going to be that edge rusher for you? Chop Robinson, they draft him in the first round to be that guy, and he has been at times. But very interesting. When rushing from the right side of the line of scrimmage over the last 5 weeks, so I'm going off of the last 5 weeks when he's had larger sample sizes. When rushing from the right side of the line of scrimmage, 63.9 pass rush grade. When rushing from the left side, a 90.5 pass rush grade. Such a big difference. And when I think about when I watched him as a prospect at Penn State, most of his best stuff came when he was aligned as a left defensive end or a left outside linebacker. He is just so much more comfortable rushing from that side of the line of scrimmage. And this week, he's not going to get Olu Fashanu because he will be out on the left side. So it'll be very interesting to see because I think that Olu probably could have handled him decently well, obviously knowing each other very well from their time at Penn State, going up against each other in practice every single day. But I don't know how much they actually went up against each other in practice with Olu being the left tackle and Chop Robinson be on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So where will they align Chop Robinson maybe goes into the type of pass rush grade that he's going to have. I wonder if the Dolphins see that too, and they're just going to stick with him on that left side of the defense there. So because the pass rush grade has just been so good when he's
it's the matchup versus where he's been most productive.
Right.
Like that push-pull between those two things.
Right. And I mean, you're going up against a vet. You're going up against Morgan Moses. So
yeah.
We'll see. We will see. We will see how it plays out for them. Falcons and Vikings. Man. This can I start with this one? Because I want to start by just talking about Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
It's been bad.
Yeah.
It's basically just been the 2 games that he played against the Bucs where he was unbelievable, just torched their defense. Over 900 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Like he was just an absolute monster in the 2 wins that they had against the Bucs. And basically every other game, he has not been a top 20 quarterback. And that's probably putting it kindly because Kirk Cousins, another 4 turnover-worthy plays this past week against the Chargers. So far, he's got 5 big-time throws and 12 turnover-worthy plays when he is pressured this season, and he has 21 turnover-worthy plays overall. Both of those turnover-worthy play numbers, most in the NFL. So when pressured and not when pressured, he's going up against a Brian Flores defense in their own house in Minnesota, which has forced the most turnover-worthy plays against quarterbacks this season. This is a terrible recipe for the Atlanta Falcons, especially like in the passing game. If they can run the football really well with Bijan Robinson, okay, like they'll have a chance to keep this game close. But my goodness, all of the numbers tell us that the Vikings are going to have the advantage when it comes to defending the pass against the Atlanta Falcons. And in fact, like it could be very bad and turnover-worthy, play-worthy. So it's just it's a major matchup to look out for because Kirk looks like the age is catching up to him this season. And again, outside of those games against Tampa Bay, it's been tough for him.
Yeah, he's my plus factor, basically. That was an obvious one given all of the things that you just said too. And I think what's really interesting is the fact that, all right, you have a guy like Bijan Robinson that defenses have to account for regardless of anything. They're going to respect it no matter how much you even end up running him because of what he's capable of. Why are you not building off of that then with more play action? The Falcons rank dead last in play, or Kirk Cousins specifically ranks dead last in play action percentage at 13.9%. I don't understand. Like that seems like something that would naturally go with kind of this scheme and help out Kirk Cousins too. And it's a departure from what he was doing in Minnesota. I don't really understand necessarily the lack of usage there, especially then when you are going against a team like this where you can use any help that you can get as far as mitigating, letting these guys pin their ears back and go after you, which is what Brian Flores' teams can do, and they can do it from multiple levels, and they can do it with different guys. I think last week, Minnesota, almost half of their defensive snaps came without a defensive lineman on the field. or at least somebody not like aligned like a defensive line. It was
Okay. So just not
like,
having their hands in the dirt, you're saying.
not having like a down lineman. It was wild. It was like they had 6 linebackers on the field and 5 defensive backs, or 5 linebackers on the field with 6 defensive backs. Like if you look at their personnel groupings, just an absolute madman. And also just the sheer number of personnel groupings that Brian Flores was going to throw at you. It's a lot. And Kirk Cousins is one of the more experienced quarterbacks in this league. You should be able to kind of dissect certain things, especially given the fact that he was in Minnesota last year. So this is kind of one of those revenge games. But the beautiful part of Brian Flores' scheme is, there's actually quite a bit of difference this year than last year, just given some of the personnel, like getting Andrew Van Ginkel and guys like Blake Cashman. Those are huge difference makers for what these guys do defensively, because again, they just buck traditional defensive roles when you're talking about this. And again, that's reflected in the personnel groupings and who's out on the field and how they're aligned and all this other stuff. So that was my plus factor, is just kind of how Kirk Cousins deals with all of that. And the fact that there is a little bit of an opportunity here, because the Vikings have allowed the 5th most passing yards this season, which is kind of contradictory to what we think, but it's also one of those things where you live by the blitz, you die by the blitz. So get the ball out quickly. Can you kind of punch it into? Vikings are 18th in red zone at scoring and 6th in goal to go defense. So they're good. Can you be better and use kind of the experience you have? That's my plus factor. My matchup that matters is just these Atlanta DBs against Minnesota. Not only their receivers, but the deep passes in general. Something happens when Justin Jefferson is like right there at 100 yards, and somehow he just, either Kevin O'Connell or Justin Jefferson himself, figures out how to get open down the field. And when you know that that's the guy that you need to take out of the game, every team knows this, he's still able to kind of be effective and be part of this engine that makes this Minnesota offense go. And Sam Darnold is more confident than ever throwing the ball down the field. Justin Jefferson still leads the team in catches over 15 yards for the Vikings. He has 30 of them this year. And again, when you consider the fact that he is public enemy number 1 when you go to play the Minnesota Vikings if you're an opposing defense. You need to shut down Justin Jefferson. So many defensive coordinators are going to look at him and be like, just not him. Don't let him beat us. We're fine getting beat by everybody else. And that's what Minnesota wants you to do too, because they also have Jordan Addison, they have TJ Hawkinson back in the lineup, you have Aaron Jones coming out of the backfield. Johnny Munt caught a touchdown this last game where Sam Darnold showed his confidence so beautifully in evading the rush. He evaded a defender, kind of sidestepped him, stepped up in the pocket, and delivered to Johnny Munt in this last game. And so that's what you have to contend with if you're the Atlanta defense, and especially that back level. And their coverage unit does generate a positive EPA per play. They rank 12th, but yet they allow the highest completion percentage in the NFL at 75.5%.
Yeah, I mean, your point about the Vikings allowing the 5th most passing yards was something that I was going to talk about with my plus factor. And fantasy football people might be mad at me for this. I'm going to say Kyle Pitts, because Trey McBride had 12 catches on 12 targets for 96 yards last week against this Minnesota Vikings defense. Now, Trey McBride is a better player than Kyle Pitts is. So it could just happen to be like, oh, yeah, I don't want to say force feeding, but they're feeding their better player, and they're giving Trey McBride his due because he's been one of the best tight ends in the NFL this season. So it could just be that, but it could be a little bit more there with maybe Minnesota just really struggles to cover the tight end position in general. Kyle Pitts is coming off of 2 games where he's had 3 targets for 1 catch and 9 yards. And then last week it was 2 targets, 0 catches, 0 yards. Then after the game, Raheem Morris basically said, like, hey, we got to get Kyle the ball more. Now, he wasn't totally throwing his offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, or his quarterback, Kirk Cousins, onto the bus at all. He was like, whether that is an us thing or a Kyle thing, I would like to see more production out of Kyle Pitts. This feels like it could be the week for that to happen, as crazy as it sounds, like you said, with a great Vikings defense. Giving up as many yards as they did to Trey McBride last week, given the fact that it was emphasized to the media that they really want to get this guy the football a little bit more. Kirk Cousins maybe just wanting to use the tight end as that security blanket type of position to throw the ball to and get the ball to him very quickly. I wonder if it's a somewhat big day for Kyle Pitts, whatever that looks like. So I have him.
I was saying you're setting yourself up to get yelled at.
Go Gators, whatever. The New Orleans Saints at the New York Giants. Saints run defense, I think, is going to be an issue. I'll just pair both of mine for this game. These are two teams who obviously aren't having the seasons that they would have liked to have. But it forms a little bit of an interesting matchup because I really do think the matchup that matters is Saints run defense, which was bad last week. I mean, Ridgeway, Turner, Brzee, all those guys had run defense grades below 45 last week. As a team, 29.3 run defense grade last week for the New Orleans Saints. So it was not pretty for them. They have struggled along the defensive line throughout the year. Kyren Williams was able to really get whatever he wanted in this game. And if you limit Matthew Stafford to below 200 passing yards, he had 183 passing yards last game. You got to think that's a victory. Like you got to think you got to play, especially with as many injuries as the Saints secondary has faced this season. For these new secondary players to come in and hold the Rams to less than 200-yard passing, that is a win. But Kyren getting over 100 yards rushing and a high rushing efficiency, that just comes from them not being able to stop the run game. Tyrone Tracy on the other side of things for the Giants is my plus factor here because he's had 32 yards and 42 yards the last 2 weeks, respectively. He's been generally bottled up since really he kind of burst onto the scene with those first couple of games when he was really getting involved as the lead back. I don't want to even say starter, but just the guy who was getting the lion's share of the carries. It's really cooled down for him over the last 2 weeks. This is an opportunity for him to have another resurgence and a great game against a struggling Saints defensive line. So with this one certainly being at home, knowing that the Giants are going through this quarterback carousel, run the football. You know they're going to want to establish the run, and I think it could be a really nice game from Tyrone Tracy here. And then, of course, that matchup of the Saints run defense versus the Giants offensive line. So those are mine sort of all packaged together about how I see this game.
I'm going to start with my plus factor, though, because my plus factor is any receiver, not wide receiver, any person that's going to catch a pass other than Malik Neighbors for the Giants. And you've seen Tyrone Tracy be able to kind of factor into that as well. But there's just such a major drop-off in receiving yards, catches that gain a first down from Malik Neighbors. And then after that, it's like, all right, if you're able to take away Malik Neighbors, what else does this offense have to offer? And you just went into it with the run game. I do think that this is a really good opportunity to run the ball, but then also, all right, can you get something else going in the pass game? Can you establish Darius Slayton, or can you, again, get a guy like Tyrone Tracy out of the backfield, kind of those easier, higher completion percentage throws, all that kind of stuff down the field to just have a better, more in rhythm passing game. That's my plus factor. And then the matchup that matters is on kind of the other side of things, and it's the Giants defensive line again against the Saints offensive line. I think that, there was a lot of talk about after Leonard Williams had the thickest of sixes, I suppose, that he might be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, which is something that I think we've talked about Dexter Lawrence for, which rightfully so. But I don't know. I'd love to see a sexy play out of Sexy Dexy. Why not?
He's out for the year, though. He's out for the year.
He is out. Oh, God, I keep forgetting that.
He hurt his elbow, so he's out for the year.
Oh, I forgot about that. You're totally
Elijah
right.
Chapman, maybe? Maybe a thick six from Elijah Chapman then, but... Yeah,
I think it must have been something I just blocked out of my memory. Actually, this week was really bad for guys especially the Niners Christian McCaffrey going out for presumably the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Jordan Mason on IR. There's just there were so many guys this week that I feel like were just out.
And Dexter's tough because, obviously you hope that it's not a super long-term thing. You don't think you hope it's not anything that's going to linger into next year or whatever, because you really, he was having you were right. He's having a defensive player of the year type of a season. And he was the bright spot along the defensive line. And I think the issues for the Giants, as we sort of talk about this team now with an NFL draft mindset, is you traded for Brian Burns. You obviously drafted Kayvon Thibodeau with a premium pick. And the whole idea was you didn't want it to just be Dexter Lawrence this year. And unfortunately, it still felt like it was. And so your chips are sort of on the table with your defensive line, though. Like, I don't think the Giants are going to be drafting like a defensive lineman in the first round or anything like that, unless they wanted to pair Mason Graham with Dexter Lawrence, which would be certifiably sick. I'm not going to lie now that I'm thinking about it, but I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to go for a quarterback, but their defensive line plays got to be a lot better. And I think the point still stands, even with the guys that are out there without Dexter Lawrence, is this might be even more towards your point of like, hey, somebody step up. Like, let's see it. This was the guy who he was really carrying this defensive line throughout most of the season. Now that he is out for the year, somebody else step up. The Saints have been up and down with their offensive line. Trevor Penning's been up and down. Talise Fuanga, obviously a rookie, been in and out of the lineup. Now that they have Eric McCoy back, it's been a little bit more solidified in the middle. But your point still stands about somebody on the Giants defensive line to give Giants fans something to be excited about, to be like, okay, these are some of the players and the reason why we bring these guys in.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about the Saints offensive line. They have been up and down, so their numbers this season haven't been phenomenal, and they've had 115 pressures allowed in pass protection, and that ranks 19th in the league. Has that gone up since Eric McCoy has returned to the lineup? Yes. There was something like Eric McCoy was the most devastating injury for the New Orleans Saints this season. I realize they've suffered more than that, but Eric McCoy was so foundational to what has happened for this Saints offense that getting him back has really righted the ship in a lot of ways. But then, can you essentially get, like, is there still something there? Can you that whole push pull at the line of scrimmage is going to be interesting because, can somebody step up for the Giants? Brian Burns, again, he does lead the Giants in pressures, but he's not necessarily been the player that you thought you were acquiring. And then Kayvon Thibodeau, you thought the tandem of those two on either side of the line was really, like you said, going to be a lot more productive than they have been, because while Brian Burns leads the team in pressures with 42, Kayvon Thibodeau is all the way down at 20. And that's just not acceptable for the draft capital that you ended up investing in him. Now, if the Giants do go out and get a free agent quarterback, I don't know, then maybe Mason's in play again as far as your draft pick goes. And you could have like a situation like Tampa does with Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey on the interior of that defensive line, insulates things. But yeah.
Little mini matchup that matters before we move on to the next game. Carr had 24 completions last game to 9 different receivers. Now, one of them was Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill also out for the year, so he won't be one of them. But have an opportunity to go up against a New York secondary that has struggled. And just shout out to Clint Kubiak and the job that he has done as the offensive play caller there with the Saints, where, I mean, no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed. It just finding the ways to get the ball down the field with all different types of receivers. I mean, it's just been a great job. And we know that New York has struggled to cover guys so far this season. So I wonder if that is going to continue even without Taysom Hill in the lineup now. You're just taking another piece away. What does that look like? So that's sort of a mini matchup that matters here, just to put a bow on this game. Panthers at Eagles. I think a lot of people have loved what they have seen from the Carolina Panthers over the last couple of weeks. But it feels like nobody's really giving them a chance here going into Philadelphia against an Eagles team that is also rolling, one of the best in the NFL. We were talking about potential 1 seed. Eagles are right there as well, sitting there at 10-2. So they're a team that absolutely has their sights set on the 1 seed and potentially getting a bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But what do you think about this game? Where's your eyes go for a matchup that matters with the Panthers and the Eagles?
I mean, it's an obvious one, but it has to be the Panthers' run defense against Saquon. Like, the Panthers' run defense has the second worst grade this season so far at a 45.9 overall grade. Are generating a positive EPA per play, which is kind of the weird part of all of this, is that positive EPA per play allowed. So that's obviously not a good thing. Anyway, you look at what Saquon's been able to do this year. That's the biggest story for this Eagles offense, and the thing that you need to shut down the most. He's first in rushing yards, second in yards after contact, which is 837 rushing yards after contact, which is a wonderful season all on its own right there. 58 rushes gaining a first down. That ranks 3rd in the league. 32 rushes gaining 10 or more yards. This is the backbreaking part of Saquon Barkley's game and of this Eagles offense, is these explosive runs that happen. And he has 32 of those, which again ranks first in the league. 6 rushing touchdowns of 20 or more yards, which is like laughable. 3 more than any other player. So that's number one. You have to be able to shut him down. But what again has been so beautiful about this Eagles offense this year is that even if you do shut down Saquon Barkley, then you have to deal with a guy like AJ Brown down the field. And they just are able to hit you in so many different ways so that even if you do make them one-dimensional, this Eagles offense, especially behind that offensive line, which is once again one of the best in football, it still doesn't do a whole lot. But I do think that given how poorly Carolina's defense performs against the run and on the ground, this has the most potential for disaster, I guess, is how you want to put it.
My matchup that matters is it's the Eagles front 7 really against the Panthers offensive line. Bryce has been playing really well since he's been reinserted as a starting quarterback back in the lineup. And against pressure, since week 9, against pressure, Bryce Young still got 4 big-time throws and only 1 turnover-worthy play, almost a 70 PFF grade. I mean, like, that's really high. That's, again, reminiscent of Bryce Young in Alabama type of numbers that we saw from him. So he's playing that level of quarterback right now, or at least he's looking a lot more like the Alabama version of Bryce than we have seen over the last year and a half before this point during his NFL career. This Eagles defensive line, we know it's good. We know that it's stout, especially in the middle, but also you've got to throw the linebackers into that too. Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean are playing like the best linebacker duo in the NFL. And it's funny, for a long time, certainly as a draft analyst, I'd look at this Eagles defense and just roster overall and say, I don't know, I guess like linebacker is kind of the only area where they're weak, or they don't have, like a 2-man rotation, or they don't have somebody waiting in the wings or in the farm system. But now they got 2 of the best linebackers in the NFL. So now mock drafts are impossible with the Eagles, or you could say that it's a free-for-all, true best player available, however you look at it. Anyways, it's going to be a tough test. It's probably going to be Bryce's toughest test yet to this point. Over the last 2 weeks, no quarterback has more big-time throws than Bryce Young, not just under pressure, but just overall. He's got 9. So really excited to see what he looks like going into Philadelphia and playing a team that is absolutely rolling. Because it just feels like, man, I'll say this about Bryce and Carolina's offense. Bryce looked like he knew there was so much pressure on him last year and at the beginning of this year. Like he looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And now that Carolina is, I don't know if mathematically, but like eliminated from playoff contention, they are currently in possession of a top 5 draft pick. There's no real expectations. He looks like he's playing free. He looks like he's playing confident. And obviously we're seeing a great version of him. So do we get the Bryce is playing with house money, Bryce Young, against the Philadelphia Eagles? Because anytime that's the case, that's sort of a dangerous recipe for even a really good football team for the Philadelphia Eagles. So matchup that matters is, can the offensive line hold up enough for Bryce to make those tight window throws and even still make those throws when he is getting pressured? Because Carolina's offensive line, 77.1 PFF grade. That's top 10 in the NFL. 75.1 PFF passing grade. That's also top 10 in the NFL. So they're doing their job. Bryce is gelling with them. This is one of those games where I think on paper, maybe the spread's going to be a lot. A lot of people are just saying the Eagles are locked for this one. I can't wait to watch this game. I'm very excited to watch this one. Who's your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, it was Bryce Young. And I'm glad that you brought up the stats about the offensive line, because I actually spent quite a bit of time this week talking about Bryce Young. And while it's not necessarily quantifiable, given that it's more along the lines of something has clicked mentally, and whether it is because he's able to play free, but his confidence is manifesting in him being able to throw the ball down the field. His since week 9 passing stats of 10 or more on throws of 10 or more yards, 467 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 94.8 PFF grade, which ranks 3rd in the league in that span. And then there's that, and then there's how he's doing against the blitz, or when he's facing a blitz package. 360 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 21 completions, gaining a first down. So even when it's in those do or die situations, he's able to navigate those situations really, really well. We saw that in that touchdown throw to Adam Thielen, or the almost touchdown throw to Adam Thielen too, which should have been ruled a touchdown in this last game. I
Well,
think
I don't
that
know. We gotta hold on. We gotta let the refs have their authority here. They called the game as did. No, I understand. I'm just kidding. I'm just
I was
kidding.
just gonna say,
All
I
Bucks
mean,
bias aside, I think he
I
caught the
know.
thing.
I'm putting my Bucks bias aside for this because I really am impressed with what Bryce Young has been able to do and just the comfort level that he has. And I think a lot of that is a testament to the fact that this offensive line is much improved over last year. They made a lot of kind of additions to it, or at least invested in it, both by player and coach wise. And then you also see, like, Joe Gilbert is the offensive line coach now in Carolina, who was in Tampa, and Tampa has had good offensive lines, and you know that they know how to kind of put one together as far as what they need from their personnel. They're getting that this year, and they are a top 10 unit when you're talking about offensive line units, which is not something, again, that we necessarily associated with the Carolina Panthers. And you look at the individual grades of these guys, three of the five have season grades, overall grades of 69 or better. And I think guards, especially that interior of the line, when you're talking about Damian Lewis, especially, has the highest grade on the team as far as offensive line grades go. So those are guys that it matters, especially when if Bryce Young is feeling pressure. That interior has really held up for him, and I think again that has contributed to the confidence that he has. I think him sitting on the bench and being able to see this offensive line work when he's not behind it and see it, work for Andy Dalton. That was something that clicked in his head, or one of the things, if you're trying to quantify exactly what's happened and allowed Bryce Young to get so much better. I think that has a huge part of it.
My plus factor is Jonathan Brooks. I get it.
Mm.
It's only 6 carries, 18 yards last week, but 0.33 missed tackles forced per attempt. Love to see that number above a 0.3, and 3.7 yards after contact, very close to the 4.0 average that we like to say. Honestly, anything above 3 when it comes to yards after contact per attempt. If you get to 4, you're really cooking as a running back. He showed me flashes of the version of Jonathan Brooks that I saw at Texas, which I was very, very excited about. They signed Chuba Hubbard to a long-term deal. Shout out to Chuba Hubbard for getting it. We love that he got paid and that he got a bag. I was very shocked that it happened, just because I think that Jonathan Brooks is an extremely dynamic back, and I wondered if it was only a matter of time before he becomes the bell cow back in Carolina. Perhaps that's not the case. Perhaps that's not the plan. But for now, I think they got 2 legit running backs to be able to run the football. So we talk about Saquon Barkley, and I understandably so. He's the best back in this game, but Carolina can run the football too, especially if it's those 2 guys and how well they've been playing as of late, minus 1 late game fumble from Chuba Hubbard last week. Browns Steelers.
Division game.
Division game. Obviously a big deal. So it's in Pittsburgh. Rematch of the NFL Films Thursday Night Football snow game that we saw a couple of weeks ago. What do we think about this one here? What's your matchup that matters, Carmen?
Yeah, well, provided it doesn't snow again.
I don't think it's supposed to. I didn't check the weather, admittedly.
I know.
We're recording this.
Honestly, George Pickens is becoming the latest unhinged wide receiver. Like, we see it week in and week out. It's like something happens, and it gives a new appreciation, I also feel like, for Mike Tomlin when you kind of reflect on the types of players that he's had on his teams, where you never really knew the full extent of the crazy until these guys were gone from Pittsburgh or out of the league or all of that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying George Pickens is AB by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a little unhinged, and it makes it entertaining right now just to see kind of the passion and the way that he plays. And the amount of smack he's talking and all that other stuff. So you look at that, him versus Denzel Ward, I think is going to be a really fun matchup, again, provided that the weather doesn't play a factor in all of this and they can throw the ball down the field, which is something that the Steelers have been doing really, really well since Russ took over. I mean, we've had a couple vintage Russ throws, vintage Russ games even at this point, especially as of late, where this man is playing like... coming into this season, it was like there was a lot of doubt because we hadn't seen this Russ in years at this point. We didn't see him in Denver. And it was, if this is going to work out for the Pittsburgh Steelers, we're going to need to see the Russell Wilson from 4-5 years ago even. We're getting the Russ from 4 or 5 years ago in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's and George Pickens is the main beneficiary of it. He's got 14 catches of 20 or more yards. That ranks first in the league. 474 yards on those 20 plus yard throws. That also ranks first in the league. And then you look at Denzel Ward, who has been doing well for this Browns defense, 71.8 PFF grade, which is tied for 22nd among corners. So that's by all means, that's a solid performance this year. But man, Russell Wilson and George Pickens has just turned into something special, and I think that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch.
Round 2 of Jerry Jeudy versus the Steelers corners. And this is my matchup that matters. And I think it has to be, because anytime a guy has 235 receiving yards the year or the week prior.
Most against a former team. Most by a wide receiver against a former team.
Against his former team. He beat out Terrell Owens when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was taking on the San Francisco 49ers. And so, man, that was an incredible performance. Now, obviously, Denver was going through some miscommunications in the secondary. There were a couple of broken plays there that factor in. But even if you take those broken plays out, I mean, this is a guy who was destined to have over 100 yards receiving in that game. And he was the leading receiver when the Steelers faced off against the Browns a couple of weeks ago. He had 85 receiving yards. And Joey Porter Jr. has been really struggling this season. He's been committing a lot of penalties, up to 13 penalties now, which is the most in the NFL. He had 5 of them last week. 2 of them were defensive holds. 3 of them were defensive pass interference. And so, we're in a situation where Jameis and Jerry Jeudy, very clearly, like, this is his go-to wide receiver. And you and I, when we covered the Buccaneers down in Tampa, when Jameis Winston was there, when he's got his go-to connection, whether it was with Chris Godwin or whether it was to Mike Evans, I mean, it's just stat stuffing every single week. And so I'm not saying that Jerry Jeudy's going to get 200 receiving yards this week, although I guess I wouldn't doubt Jameis Winston to do it again. It is going to be interesting.
Do it again.
And he'll do it again. It will be interesting to see him go up against a Steelers secondary that, in my opinion, over the last 3 or 4 games has really been struggling. It's the defensive line, in my opinion, and I'll get to, I was going to say I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to it right now. Defensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers is fantastic, but amongst the names that we talk about all the time, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, what Keanu Benton is developing into as the other interior defensive lineman there, Alex Highsmith, whatever. Nick Herbig has been unbelievable for this team, not just as a designated pass rusher, but just as a presence on the football team. He has 4 games this season where he has earned an elite pass rushing grade, including the last 2 games that he has played. He has been unbelievable, and I did a little bit of a film study with Ollie Conley for the Trenches show earlier this week. The hand usage, the mastery, the production going all the way back to his time when he was at Wisconsin. This guy just lives in the backfield, and he's been a plus factor over the last 2 weeks. When defenses have focused heavily on Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, he gets the one-on-ones, and he wins them. This is a recipe for success every single week. So shout out to Nick Herbig for being the guy where we see great edge rushers shoot. There's one on the other side of the line of scrimmage with Myles Garrett where the Cleveland Browns have been trying to find that steady presence opposite Myles Garrett or just anybody on the defensive line to make up for the fact that there are so many blocking eyes that are going towards Myles Garrett. That's the case with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward as well. And Nick Herbig is the guy who is taking advantage of it in a huge way. It is truly a team game playing together within not just that defensive line, but that front 7. But Nick Herbig is going to be my plus factor because he's just been an animal the last couple of weeks.
My plus factor in this, I'm excited to get to and I'm excited to talk to you about it because it is the ultimate plus factor, and it's Jameis Winston. And what Jameis Winston we're going to get. I don't know about you, Trev, but this last Monday night game, just getting to collectively experience the reaction of everybody of a life that you and I lived for so long. Just the full Jameis Winston experience.
Even all the way up to the post-game press conference where he said, I pray to the Lord that he delivers me from pick sixes. I mean, it was a Jameis performance, not only on the field, but off the field. Honestly.
Off the field. Oh, like deliver the ball to Jerry Jeudy. I could go on and on with the Catholic humor that has now started. But I mean, he really is the ultimate plus factor, and it's which Jameis Winston you get or how much of one Jameis Winston you get versus the other side of the coin, because we did see some absolutely explosive plays, which is why Jameis Winston, I likened him to, I don't know if this is like a good way to say it, but he's almost like a drug. It's like you get this high from him, and like he shows you these amazing things, like the 70-yard touchdown pass. It's like as soon as Bo Nix throws a 93-yarder, it's followed up by Jameis Winston throwing a 70-yard bomb. Like that kind of stuff, you're like, oh my God, that's incredible. Just the potential that Jameis Winston has, it keeps you wanting more. And then there's also the other side of it where he threw 6 touchdown passes.
Mm-hmm.
2 of which were to the other team.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the production versus can you kind of harness Jameis Winston and the good things from Jameis Winston and limit, the ways that he makes mistakes and the pick sixes and all of that kind of stuff, deliver him from the pick sixes. I mean, the stats in this last game on Monday night were just absolutely insane. He throws for almost 500 yards. I can't say enough though how much I loved sitting back and letting everybody experience, like the whole nation together experience the full Jameis Winston experience that you and I got a front seat to in Tampa for so long.
It is pretty crazy just how different the Cleveland Browns look with Jameis Winston under center,
yes,
compared to Deshaun Watson. If anybody thought that the Browns were going to start Deshaun Watson next season, I just, every single game that passes makes that harder to believe because of how bad the offense has been for them over the last 2 years, and how it feels like the Browns beat up along the offensive line, don't have the run game they had over the last couple of years, all this kinds of stuff. And yet Jameis is able to move the ball, and you got to be able to get a quarterback who is willing to move the ball down the field, and Deshaun Watson was not willing to do it. So I understand the money is there. I don't have the answers of what happens next, but I can tell you that with every single game that passes for the Cleveland Browns, and for what will probably happen throughout the rest of this regular season, it gets harder and harder to believe that Deshaun Watson is starting for this team next year, simply because of how bad it looked with him and how different it looks now with Jameis being willing to push the ball deep down the field. You get the turnovers, but like you can at least see the offensive output. And we didn't even see that before when Deshaun Watson was there. Raiders and Bucks, a little bit of a Jameis Winston segue there. Rematch of, I don't remember what Super Bowl number was, but the 2003 Super Bowl, Tampa Bay Buccaneers were victorious. Just wanted to make sure they said that to start this off.
Obviously.
Matchup that matters here. What do we got, Carmen?
I think you have to involve Mike Evans in whatever matchup it is, just given the fact that he has to continue the pace that he's on in order to get to that 1,000-yard season again. And this is something that's really important to him. What's he need? Like 96 a game now? So prior to last game, it was 99.5. So and then he got 112 yards, something like that. I haven't done the math as far as what he needs to average, but it's probably in the 95, 96 range.
Yep.
At this point. So, I mean, to be safe, he needs at or just around 100 yards a game from here on out. And what I love about, so Mike isn't one necessarily for individual accolades, but this is something that he does care about. And by default, then it's something that Baker Mayfield cares about. And by default, then it's something that Liam Cohen cares about. This is something that the team cares about getting from Mike Evans. And so there is going to be a concerted effort week in and week out for the rest of the season to try and get Mike Evans the ball. So if you're a team going against them, it simplifies things a little bit. The Bucs do have a wonderful and very diverse run game to fall back on now, which I absolutely adore. Bucky Irving's official breakout game last week. You have Rachaad White kind of mixing in there as the change-up back, go Devils. I just think that this offense still runs through Mike Evans because of the fact that you're trying to get him this accolade that sets him apart from all the rest of the receivers in NFL history. So he's got 39 catches for 521 yards right now, 7 receiving touchdowns, 32 catches gaining a first down. The 17 catches gaining 15 or more yards, which is the most on the Bucs, that's the one that you key in on, because the easiest way to get Mike Evans to these numbers is those chunk plays, is to have him running longer routes hard, like longer developing routes, especially. So that's where the offensive line needs to hold up for Baker. Baker needs to be able to find anticipate when Mike Evans is getting open, or they do have the rapport now where Mike can kind of scramble around and figure out ways to get himself open, and Baker just needs time to make that happen. But limit the turnover worthy plays in the process of doing this. So it's Mike Evans versus these Raiders corners. I just think that it kind of starts and ends there for the Buccaneers offense for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and the corners for the Raiders have struggled this season. Nate Hobbs, highest graded corner, 63.4 overall grade. But, Jacorian Bennett, Jack Jones, Darnay Holmes, Cameron Richardson, just listen to all of them there. They got coverage grades in the 50s throughout this season. And so it just has not been as good of a unit as, honestly, I thought it was going to be. I thought this was going to be a sneaky, decent secondary here for the Raiders, and it just has not played out that way. On the other side of the football, I'm going to go with the Raiders offensive line versus the Bucs defensive line. Raiders offensive line, good in run blocking. If you look at just week 9 to this point, so the last 4 or 5 weeks, you get to you see numbers where they're actually earning really good run blocking grades as a unit. Pass blocking grades, not so much. Just overall, their blocking grade is 12th in the NFL. They're the 5th highest run blocking grade in the NFL, 25th in pass blocking grade. So it is a Buccaneers defensive line that I lacks some star power, I would say, certainly at the edges. Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea, I think, are a fantastic duo in the middle, but can somebody step up on the edges and really get to them and get the pressure? Yaya Diaby leads the team in pressure, as we assumed that would be the case with him going into the season, but then it's a major drop-off. The next edge rusher is Anthony Nelson at 22, so it goes all the way from 46 to 22, and the Joe Tryon show you get 20. Logan Hall at 15, Chris Braswell at 14. So just a major drop-off. We need another edge rusher here to step up for this team if they're going to recapture the top of this division, which they're tied with the Falcons right now. But for the Bucs, they will lose the tiebreaker against the Atlanta Falcons, losing both of the games to that team. And so you've got to make sure that you clear that by one game. So this is a team that you've really got to figure out, how do we get more pass rush? And this is a week to sort of figure it out, because if they cannot get after Aiden O'Connell and pressure him a little bit here, I think it'll be a little bit of a struggle. My plus factor, though, because I mentioned Aiden O'Connell, is Aiden O'Connell, who for the Black Friday game against the Kansas City Chiefs did what he needed to do to win the football game, right? I mean, he had them in position, including a great last drive to get them in field goal range. And it was just a situation where, Jackson Powers Johnson thought he saw somebody move. He snaps it early. The ball just goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Boom, there it is. Somehow they find a way to win again. Have you seen, you're a Harry Potter person, right?
Absolutely.
Have you seen the memes where it's like Taylor Swift in the press box, cursing the other team so the Chiefs win, and it's the clip of Snape, cursing
Professor Quirrell, trying to curse, that's
what it felt like. That's genuinely what it felt like when that snap happened, because it felt like the Raiders should have had that big win, and they don't get it. But
someone 4 big time throws in this past game. Saying that football. There it is.
Yes. 4 big time throws in this last game, 2 turnover worthy plays, 74.4 passing grade. I like Aiden O'Connell. I really do. He's not somebody that I think you could just totally write off. I liked him more than Gardner Minshew going into this season. I know he's not perfect, but to me, he's a quarterback who gives you a chance to win. He really is. So he's my plus factor here, because if he plays like he did last week, it's going to come down to the wire again, just like it did last week, in my opinion. Who's your plus factor here?
It's basically kind of the money down situations for both teams, because the Bucs actually rank in the top 5 for most of these really, good, the situational stuff. So 3rd and 4th down, red zone scoring drives, red zone touchdown efficiency. The Bucs are top 5 in all of that. So you know that the Bucs can score once they get inside the red zone. You know that they're going to be able to continue drives to get there on 3rd and 4th down. Raiders, on the other hand, though, struggling in pretty much all of those categories. 3rd and 4th down conversion rate, the Raiders rank 27th in the league. Their red zone touchdown efficiency rank, they rank 29th. And then they're 18th in red zone scoring drive. So in order to keep pace with a Bucs team, which is top 5 in scoring offense, by the way, they are capable of putting up a lot of points. You're going to need to do the same if you're the Raiders, and that means punching it in when it matters, or continuing drives on some of those money down, crucial situation type throws and plays rather. So the third and fourth down conversion rate just has to be better for Aiden O'Connell and this offense, which I don't know if this is really the week to do it, given what you're going to be facing, especially along that defensive line. Antoine Winfield Jr., I believe, still healthy, and that's he's a guy that can really affect what a quarterback can do, playing with his eyes, manipulating stuff like that when you're lined up, pre-snap especially. So that's something that I would look out for sure in this game. And the Bucs are home, so they're not going to have the Raiders are now having to travel across multiple time zones to get there.
That's it for the 1 p.m. games. We'll get to the afternoon games and the primetime games in a second. But before that, there's some things the school didn't teach you, right? How to handle finances and really how to set your family and your kids specifically up for financial success. Would have been a nice class to learn. Be able to have that in your back pocket for the future. You can set up an investment account for your child that'll grow as they grow. I didn't know that until I heard about the UGMA accounts. That'll help prepare them for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life. It was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan and manage your family's financial path. With a kids UGMA investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. While your kids can't invest while they are minors, this account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments time to grow. The funds, they can be used on anything, right? I mean, you could be used early in life, books, summer camp, after school activities, certain tuition, things like that. Or even when they're adults, you can use it to help them buy their first car, their first home, start a business, whatever it is. There's no downside to being able to financially plan the right way. All online, setting up an account could take you as little as just 5 minutes. You start investing with as little as $1 a day, and then just manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Fabric is partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. It's a paid promotion for the Fabric UGMA product and not for investment advisory services. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Custodial services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Terms apply. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. We got a tight division race in the NFC West. So anytime we get one of these four teams matched up against the other, we know that it's a big deal. This one starts the afternoon slate for us here. Carmen, what's your matchup that matters here?
It's the one that I'm, again, looking forward to watching most, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. against either Devin Witherspoon or Tariq Woolen. Riq Woolen. It's going to be fun. These are just young players that are going to be going against each other for a very long time, given that they're in the same division. And you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. this season, 78.0 PFF grade that ranks 23rd among wide receivers, 606 receiving yards, 29th among wide receivers. His 7 receiving touchdowns, though, tied for 5th. And his 15 contested catches, this is the big thing. It's why Kyler Murray trusts him so much. He has 15 of them. That ranks tied for 3rd among wide receivers this year. So that's really something that the guys that are going to be doing the contesting are 2 of the best young corners in the league. If you look at Devin Witherspoon, 71.9 grade, that was tied for 20th. Riq Woolen, a little bit further down, 67.9 grade, 42nd. So room for improvement there. But you also think that, again, these division matchups, you get really familiar with these guys. Anything can really happen. I just think that this is going to be one of those fireworks type matchups between one of those corners and whoever ends up on Marvin Harrison Jr. play by play, because I do think it's going to then kind of alternate quite a bit.
I'll stay with the flashy position, but I'll go to the other side here. I want to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba versus Garrett Williams. Jackson Smith-Njigba, one of the best slot wide receivers in the NFL this year. He leads or is in the top 3 of so many different categories when it comes to receiving yards, catches, receiving touchdowns, explosive plays from the slot. He has 829 receiving yards just overall, which is 11th most in the NFL. He'll be going up against Garrett Williams when he is lined up in the slot, because that is the player that the Arizona Cardinals like to put in the slot most often. Over the last, I believe it's 4 weeks, 118 coverage snaps in the slot for Garrett Williams, 82.7 coverage grade in the slot, which is 4th best in the NFL. So Williams is somebody that I really liked coming out of Syracuse. I thought he could be an outside corner, but they have really used him in the slot, and I feel like he's comfortable there. He's aggressive and he's playing very well. As you can see, having a high coverage grade when you were in the slot is extremely impressive. Thinking about all the different types of wide receivers that you have to guard, how these guys have two-way goes, how you can't really let anything behind you, but you don't want to give them too much space in front of you. It's just so difficult to recover receivers when they've got as much space as a lot of these slot receivers do, and a lot of these offensive coordinators sort of cook up these opportunities for these guys to really succeed. Few have been better at that than Jackson's been the Jigba, but Williams over the last month has been one of the better defenders at really bottling those guys up. So it'll be his toughest test yet, but I'm very excited to see these two go up against each other when JSN's in the slot and Garrett Williams is matched up against him. What's your plus factor here in this game?
Easy one, but it's Kyler Murray. And just to, he's really, in most major passing metrics, he's pretty middle of the pack this year. One of them, though, where he is top 10 is unfortunately turnover-worthy plays. He's had 9 of them this year so far. And that's something where if you're not necessarily going down if you're going down the field constantly, it's a little bit more understandable. His yards per play average is, again, middle of the pack. This is all middle of the pack kind of stuff. So I would like to see more of some of the fireworks that we saw, I think, earlier in the season when he first discovered Marvin Harrison Jr. And I get that teams adjust for these guys. And again, like I said before, the matchup between Marvin Harrison Jr. and whoever is on him cornerback-wise is going to be really interesting. But I do think that Kyler Murray, again, likes to just kind of throw up the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. And it has worked out for him given how many contested catches that the young rookie has been able to come down with. But there needs to be a concerted effort, I think, to focus on ball security when it comes to Kyler Murray, and while still trying to push the ball down the field a little bit more than he has.
Byron Murphy. He's the guy that I want to highlight for this one.
Cool.
Because when you look at the Arizona Cardinals and how they played last week in particular, you got a game that was very frustrating for them against the Minnesota Vikings, but you can even take it a little bit further back. I mean, you could go back to that Seattle Seahawks game a couple of weeks ago. They just struggled to block these guys on the interior. And a lot of it was Leonard Williams doing a ton of damage 2 weeks ago. It's time for Byron Murphy to, I think, join the party a little bit. He was good at the beginning of the season, but he's been in and out of the lineup, and he has not had a double-digit pass rush win percentage game since week 7. So it's been quite a while now. Would love to see him be able to put his best foot forward and put his best game that we have seen really over the last 2 months. And it's a Cardinals interior offensive line that has played generally well over the last month, but struggled last week against the Vikings. 50.0 overall grade against the Minnesota Vikings last week. That was their lowest of the last 4 weeks, like by far. So the Vikings were able to just really overpower them, confuse that interior offensive line. With Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, they've got the athletes to be able to do that as well. Leonard Williams was really able to take advantage 2 weeks ago. I think that Byron Murphy, I'd like to see a little bit more from him because we didn't get that same type of performance from him 2 weeks ago. And I think that there's more juice left to squeeze for what Byron Murphy could be to this interior defensive line. So I'm listing him as my plus factor in this one. I know Leonard Williams is going to play well, but let's get Byron Murphy up to speed too. Bills at Rams. Bills look pretty unstoppable, not going to lie, but they got to travel cross-country to take on the Los Angeles Rams, who we talked about earlier in the show. Got a win in New Orleans last week. A little unorthodox, very low passing output in that game, and yet they still came away with the victory. What's your matchup that matters here with these two teams?
Yeah, I'm going to go in the trenches because a lot has been made about this Rams defensive line. And though they're young, again, they've done a wonderful job of trying to make up for a player that you just really can't make up for as far as the loss goes with Aaron Donald. But you have Jared Verse. He's the leader in pass rush win percentage for the Rams at 18.5%, followed by Byron Young and then Kobe Turner. Kobe Turner, I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say that yet. I don't know if his episode has aired. He had that. There's something I know about Kobe Turner that has nothing to do with stats, and I don't know if it's actually if I'm allowed to say it publicly.
I wouldn't.
I'm going to err on the side.
Caution,
I know. I'm going to err on this, but he has a wonderful personality. I will say that about Kobe Turner. I don't know if you saw that he did the Wicked choreography. the like when he was practicing Ariana Grande's choreography from one of the musical numbers in the Wicked movie, and I don't know. I'm waiting for him to get a sack and end up doing his little choreography. That's what I want. But again, beyond the personality factor of everything and Kobe Turner and the young guys on this Rams defensive line, they are going to be going up against a very experienced and a very stout Bills offensive line. They have the fewest sacks allowed this season of any team. So sacks are going to be few and far between, and they're going to be hard to come by. Can this Rams defensive line kind of show up and affect Josh Allen and force him into maybe some situations that he doesn't want to be in? We have seen Josh Allen be at times prone to some of these turnover-worthy plays and get a little bit reckless, or he's very confident right now in how he's throwing the football. And then you do have a guy like James Cook that you can lean on as well. So I'm really interested to see if this Rams defensive line is able to affect Josh Allen via the Bills offensive line, because they have just been such a good unit this year.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Verse is my plus factor as well. It was really just somebody along the defensive line. Can they best a Bills offensive line that's playing very, very well? You mentioned how little sacks that they have given up. Jared Verse was an absolute monster this past week against the New Orleans Saints, but it feels like, what else is new? Just how well he is playing. Obviously the Bills, offensive line from their overall season statistics are playing well, but Jared Verse feels like he is just a man possessed right now. So I wonder if he can really take over this football game and really get into the backfield and disrupt a lot of what the Buffalo Bills want to do, maybe even Josh Allen. So that was my plus factor in that one. My matchup that matters, Rams cornerbacks over the last month this season, 51.0 coverage grade. That's bottom 5 in the NFL. And so this has been a weak point of the Rams defense. I think when you have your eye to the offseason and improving this team next year, a corner is going to be very, very high on their list, whether it comes to the first round of the NFL draft or maybe in free agency. So improved cornerback play is going to be something that they'll focus on this offseason, but it's not going to help them this week. And you're going up against a Bills passing attack that is pretty diverse. I mean, you got a lot of different weapons to throw the ball to, and it feels like they can focus on different things every single week. They can focus on size and contested catches one week. They can focus on more after the catch stuff with Khalil Shakir and Amari Cooper. And so there's just so many different ways that this Buffalo Bills offense can attack you. And I've talked about it over the last few weeks. I think this is the most balanced offense in the NFL. It's basically them and the Detroit Lions, right? It's hard to kind of split hairs about how well these teams are moving the ball. And it just feels like they are so in control at all times, specifically with how well Josh Allen is playing for the Buffalo Bills, and how even when one area is a little bit down, he can make up for it with his talent level. So to me, the Bills passing weapons in particular against a Rams cornerback unit that has really struggled this season, are they going to be able to hold their end of the bargain, or is this just going to be an absolute flamethrower shootout out in LA? What's your plus factor here?
Yeah, my plus factor is the flame-throwing shootout between these two quarterbacks, just given how good both of them are. I mean, Josh Allen has, I think, the leading odds now in his MVP case. And yes, exactly. Rightfully so. 86.3 PFF grade overall. That's actually 6th among quarterbacks. But Matthew Stafford has had last 4 weeks, all 4 games had above a 70 PFF grade. And it's interesting too, because you look at both of these guys, and while they both have kind of a gunslinging potential, they're overall kind of beating you in different ways. Josh Allen has the second most explosive plays or plays down the field, where he's second to only Anthony Richardson, and you know why that is. But Josh Allen is really making big time throws happen. His big time throw percentage second to Anthony Richardson, and then you have Matt Stafford, who relies a lot more on kind of getting the ball out a lot quicker, right? He's got the 7th, I believe, quickest time to throw in the league, so top 10 there. And he really just kind of identifies very quickly, processes very quickly exactly where he needs to go with the football. So it's not necessarily a big time throw percentage. He doesn't rank in the top 10 there, but he very efficiently moves the ball down the field on you. And has guys that can do it for him too. He's got receivers that rank in some of the top numbers for yards after the catch. So I really think that it's interesting to see kind of how these guys are both being so productive, but kind of doing it in a little bit different ways, and how that is going to look head to head, and who can kind of be more productive for their team. Because I think it's a toss up at this point, though this Bills defense is phenomenal, and I think that that's kind of where this comes down to is can they be effective, and can Matthew Stafford still get the ball out quickly and move the ball down the field against this Bills defense.
Bears Niners, two teams that are struggling, to say the least.
Different reasons.
I'm curious where you're going to go with this one, because Niners are a team that a lot of their struggles have been through injury, and they've got some stars that are out. They will still be out here in this game. They get to host this one against the Chicago Bears, but the Bears, they'll be moving on from Matt Eberflus, and this will be the first game with Thomas Brown as the interim head coach. And do you get the interim head coach bump, which we have seen before from some teams? Is that maybe your matchup that matters? But what are you thinking about when you think about Bears Niners this week?
Yeah, my matchup that matters is San Francisco versus the interim head coaching bump from the Chicago Bears. I honestly, I had mixed feelings about the Bears elevating Thomas Brown to head coach, because when they elevated him to offensive coordinator, you've seen so many things about this Bears offense kind of click. And despite the fact that he was working within the constraints of the same playbook that had already been installed, he was able to, the way that he called games and the way that he was able to get more information to Caleb Williams in the form of increased motion and really making things easier, giving Caleb Williams easier outs, and more answers to the question, whether that is by identifying things pre-snap or just calling shorter developing plays. Thomas Brown has been able to do that beautifully just in the short sample size that we've seen. Bears offense, since he's took over, I think has over 100 more passing yards per game than it did under Shane Waldron. And you see that Caleb Williams is more confident because of all of the information and the answers that he's being given. He's blossomed against the blitz. He's done really, really well in the face of pressure, and which has really worked out given that this offensive line has struggled this season because of injury or what have you. Thomas Brown has done so beautifully there that now you're adding all of the extra duties of being a head coach on top of that. And is that going to stretch him a little bit too thin? Is it too much too quickly? I mean, this is a guy that 3 weeks ago was the passing game coordinator and not having regular meetings with Caleb Williams at all, or having anything that he was really in charge of on game days and on the field as far as play calling goes. And now you've gone from, all right, you got 3 weeks to get used to play calling. Now you're going to have to call plays, because he will still call plays. Now on top of having to call the game and all those in-game situations. But that all being said, the Bears players so far have responded very, very well to Thomas Brown's brand of coaching, which is why I think that we've seen the bump happen from time and time and again, but it's because these guys get a fresh voice, and it's a guy that they wanted, and it's a guy that they can really get behind, and they're going to have all the motivation in the world to go against a San Francisco team that is decimated by injuries and really unrecognizable for what we thought they were going to be earlier in the season, especially now that not only Christian McCaffrey is out, but so is Jordan Mason. So you don't know how many points they're going to be able to put up on the board. And the fact that this Bears offense is healthy for the most part, and you do know that they're capable of scoring points, and you know that Caleb Williams wants to throw down the field. He's got this kind of unshakable confidence in himself. On passing, he's got passing touchdowns of 20 or more yard throws this season. He's in weeks 1 through 12, he only had 2. Week 13 at the Lions, against the Lions defense, he had 2. So he matched his season total before that on passing touchdowns of 20 yards or more. So he's confident in the scheme that it's now run by Thomas Brown. I just want to make sure that Brown is not stretched a little bit too thin to where you see this offensive progress kind of taper off, given all of the extra stuff he's now responsible for.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you make. I mean, my matchup that matters is the Niners defense as a whole versus the Bears offense as a whole, simply because the Niners defense, we think about it as one of the best in the NFL, one of the most talented in the NFL. They're hurting right now. Yeah. 52.6 defensive grade the last 3 weeks. They are 0-3 in those games, and they are 30th in the NFL in overall defensive grade. And so it's been tough for this team, I think, all season long, but in particular where they're currently at as a football team. And we'll see how motivated they are to go out there. Certainly at home, you don't think that they're going to lay down at all whatsoever, but this is an opportunity for Thomas Brown and the I think even more so than Thomas Brown, just the players on the Chicago Bears offense to have one of their best days. DJ
Mhm.
Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, these guys are going up against a 49ers secondary, 65.9 PFF grade this season, 69.7 coverage grade. Those are top half of the league, right around the middle of the league. But over the last month, it's been lower for all of those numbers. And just so when you match up with where a team is going, I understand that the Bears just fired their head coach, and that's never like a place that you want to be. But I actually think that the last half of this, or I should say the last month of this season, should be able to give us some good moments from this Bears offense starting this week, even with a tough task of going on the road to face San Francisco. So that to me is the matchup that matters. I feel like it has to be, what does this offense look like now that their interim off, their new play caller is now elevated to head coach? I agree with you completely. I just got to echo that I truly do think that is the matchup that matters, and how Thomas Brown is able to handle all of those things. On the offensive side of the ball, I think that DeAndre Swift is my plus factor here. I just have not been very impressed with DeAndre Swift at all this season from the Chicago Bears. 0.20 missed tackles forced per attempt, 2.1 yards after contact, just a 70 rushing grade this season. 70, it's not too bad. It's not like he's been terrible or anything like that, but the investment that they made in him, and for him to be the RB1, it felt like this rushing attack was going to be a lot more effective than it has been this year. And I think I've been disappointed with DeAndre Swift being the top guy. I felt like it should have been better with him in the new contract and bringing him in. So I'd like to see him be a plus factor. If the offense is going to get a bump overall, I know we're going to talk about the passing game and Caleb Williams, but I would actually like to see the run game get a lot better. And I'd like to see DeAndre Swift have one of his best games of the season this week.
Yeah, for a lot of the season, DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson especially were utilized just incorrectly, quite honestly. And you didn't see them. DeAndre Swift excels when you're able to get him in space. So whether that is kind of some of these longer toss routes, or the, throwing to him in the flat, getting the ball out of the backfield, that kind of stuff, that's where DeAndre Swift can really shine. Where I think for a lot of the first part of the season, you saw him just running up the middle, inside zone, kind of up the gut kind of stuff. And you were just like, that's not the player he is. He's not big enough for that kind of stuff. That's Roschon Johnson. And then not utilizing Roschon Johnson in those, especially goal line situations, where that's kind of the first thing that Thomas Brown did. I think it was the first touchdown, or one of the first touchdowns that the Bears scored post Shane Waldron firing, was in fact goal line. Roschon Johnson comes in and just runs it up the gut with an extra offensive lineman as a lead blocker, rather than the one that's taking the handoff. So I totally agree with you that I think that there's room for that to get a lot better, and for DeAndre Swift to showcase a little bit more of what he's good at. I just don't think he's been put in the right situations to do so. However, my plus factor is, it goes along with everything we've just talked about, and it is Caleb Williams, but Caleb Williams specifically limiting kind of those rookie moments, because what gets lost in all of the stuff about Matt Eberflus getting fired and inexplicably not calling the timeout is that Caleb Williams held the ball too long. That was absolutely something that he should have been prepared for, and all that kind of stuff. Now, he gets a pass for some of this stuff because he's a rookie. And part of being the head coach is being able to save your players from themselves in situations like that, or not put them in the situation where they're the ones that need to make those calls quite yet, because they're just not experienced or seasoned enough to do so. But you have seen things kind of week in and week out where there's a missed throw down the field. It just happened this last game. He missed DJ Moore on a mesh route, on a pass less than 10 yards down the field, which could have been a touchdown pass with about 46 seconds left in that game. So that's something that you want to see Caleb Williams click on stuff like that and not make those kinds of mistakes. But you realize that there is growing pains, and ultimately it falls on the coaching staff, and it will fall on Thomas Brown to bail him out of some of those situations, or at least to put him in situations that are more advantageous, rather than what it looked like earlier in the year, which was a total baptism by fire. And there was just nothing easy on this Bears offense in general. It was longer developing routes. You had to get through progressions, all this kind of stuff right from jump, when you didn't have the offensive line to do it, and you had a rookie quarterback that was just going to take a little bit longer to process all of that. That is gone from this offense right now. But there are still some of these rookie moments that you just want to see Caleb kind of learn from, and just not make the same kind of mistakes, and identify certain things and situations where you can kind of give your team that lift or pull ahead and be that person to kind of overcome adversity, which he's done already also beautifully. I mean, you think about the Washington game, he got the Bears to their first lead of the game with 25 seconds left. You think about being able to force overtime against the Minnesota Vikings. You think about that what should have been a game-winning drive against the Green Bay Packers, where you get the team into Cairo Santos's range and then the field goal gets blocked. All of that is really encouraging and why I think Caleb Williams ultimately will be fine, but you just want to see less and less of those rookie moments as the season goes on.
I'm cautiously excited about this game for Caleb.
Right.
Road game, historic team, new head coach. Would love to see something from him. I really would, but I agree with your points there. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we got 2 primetime games left to talk about. Chargers at Chiefs. My matchup that matters here is Ladd McConkey versus Trent McDuffie in particular.
Yeah.
Because
Same.
Ladd McConkey, 117 out of the 147 passing yards that Justin Herbert had last week. I mean, the threat percentage was through the roof. Basically, 50% of the time that Ladd McConkey was running a route, he was getting a target and he was catching the football. The next closest player to him last week was Quentin Johnston, who had 12 receiving yards. He was the man that they force-fed through the passing game last week. I don't think it could be that much of the piece of the pie this week or most weeks, but he'll be going up against Trent McDuffie. And I think when we think about Trent McDuffie, we think, oh, this is one of the best corners in the NFL. I still think that Trent McDuffie is one of the best corners in the NFL, but he has struggled this year. 60.2 coverage grade over the last 5 weeks in particular for Trent McDuffie. And if he's going to shadow Ladd McConkey a little bit, that's a tough assignment. Ladd McConkey is somebody who we thought he would just be a slot receiver coming into the NFL, but he has been somebody that the Chargers are very clear. They're clearly comfortable playing him as an X, outside of the numbers, towards the sideline. They'll use him in the slot plenty. They'll use him as a flanker, as the motion player. They use Ladd McConkey in basically every way, and I think that is going to be to their advantage against a great player like Trent McDuffie. But those are going to be the main 2 chess pieces that Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, and then, of course, what the Los Angeles Chargers are going to do on the offensive side of the ball with how they're going to utilize and deploy Ladd McConkey. Like, those are the 2 chess pieces, in my opinion, that are going to be going up against each other. So that is my matchup that matters. Because if the Chiefs can neutralize Ladd McConkey, J.K. Dobbins is hurt, which kind of goes into my plus factor. I'll talk about that in a second. But, like, man, if you can neutralize Ladd McConkey, you really put a lot on Justin Herbert's plate to lean on some of these other receivers to make stuff happen on offense.
Yeah, and that was my matchup that matters too. And not only because of like the fact that obviously Ladd McConkey has become Justin Herbert's favorite target. 2 of his last 3 games, he's gone over 100 yards, and the drop off after that is significant. But also because Ladd McConkey is dealing with some injuries right now. It's not expected to keep him out this weekend, but he has a knee and a shoulder sprain that he's dealing with. So again, he's not going to be playing at 100%, and this is such a huge part of this Chargers offense. Like you said, with J.K. Dobbins out, I can't say enough about Ladd McConkey. I'm very glad that he's kind of like popping off, but there is an opportunity here for the Kansas City Chiefs to shut down a pretty much like the guy when it comes to this Chargers offense, because without him, Justin Herbert, as good of a quarterback as he is, he just doesn't have a whole lot of options.
Plus factor is Gus Edwards. Sort of touched on it before, J.K. Dobbins being out. This is a team that wants to still run the football very, very well. And Gus Edwards, he has not been bad, but he has not been as dynamic in open space or with those long runs like J.K. Dobbins has been. And so what does the run game look like for them? To me, that's the big time plus factor of how they can really continue to move the ball on offense. Because if for as good as Ladd McConkey is, it cannot just be the Ladd McConkey show. And I am genuinely worried about that this week, because Kansas City is going to do a great job. If you only have one guy that you really go to, Spagnuolo does a great job of taking that away from you. You've got to be prepared to move the ball in other ways. And so Gus Edwards, probably having the best game of his season, honestly, is going to be paramount for this Chargers team to be able to go in Kansas City. I know Justin Herbert's going to be ready. I know he's going to have some big time throws in this game. This is going to be a really fun one to watch, but it's those little things that you have to do right to beat the Chiefs, especially in Kansas City. And Gus Edwards has to be somebody in the running back room, has to be one of those players to be able to give you a little bit of an extra edge on top of what Herbert's going to be able to give you. So I'm going with Gus Edwards and just the running game overall.
Yeah, my plus factor is actually along the Chiefs side of things. Not that I mean, this has not been the year that they've been world beaters or dominating or anything, despite what their record says. But I also just, I can't forget that last year happened. And I know it's not as fun to just say, yeah, they're going to be fine because they're the Chiefs, but like, they're going to be fine. They're just the Chiefs. That being said, if I'm going to nitpick something, this Chiefs defensive line in particular, Chris Jones is really all they have, and he has been the focal point of every offense that goes against them. You need to protect against Chris Jones, and as a result, this defensive line in particular on Kansas City just hasn't been as productive as you need it to be. Chris Jones is the only Chiefs player with a minimum of 100 snaps that has a pass rush win percentage in the top 50 league wide. He ranks 15th at 17.9%, which is great, but there's no one else in the top 50. Pass rush productivity score, Jones ranks 44th, and then nobody else in the top 50. He ranks 36th in pressure percentage, and only George Karlaftis is also in the top 50, and he sits right at number 50. So there's a drop off, and when you're paying all this attention to Chris Jones, his impact is limited. Not to say that he's still not a potential game wrecker in all of these situations. Of course he is, especially against a division team. But you need more if you're this Chiefs defensive line from this Chiefs defensive line. If you're Spags at this point, because you're not getting the pressure or the push up front that you really need to fall back on for the rest of this defense for it to be as productive as you need it to be. So that's just something, again, I'm nitpicking. I'm not in any way, shape, or form actually worried about the Kansas City Chiefs. Let me go on record by saying that. But they need more out of this defensive front.
No, they're trash, and you think that they'll never win another football game. That's what you said. The dynasty's over. It's done. It's been done for a long time.
I picked them to win the Super Bowl again this year. Damn it. Oh.
Bengals Cowboys is the last game that we're talking about here, the Monday Night Football game. You could talk about this one as a plus factor because it's really focused on Joe Burrow, but just Joe Burrow versus the Dallas Cowboys secondary. When you look at the Cowboys, 55.7 PFF grade, that's 28th in the league. 60.1 coverage grade, that's 21st in the league. And so having overall secondary and coverage grades in the 20s does not line up very well against a guy who should be right there as an MVP candidate. 90.5 passing grade for Joe Burrow. It's first in the NFL. 26 big-time throws, tied for first with Josh Allen. 3,337 passing yards. That's first in the NFL. And a 1.7 turnover-worthy play percentage. That is fourth in the NFL. It's one of Burrow's best seasons yet. And that's really saying something because this dude's special. The only thing that can really slow down the Bengals passing attack at this point is lack of motivation. Like if Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and the offensive line or whoever it is, like if they just start losing motivation because they don't really have the playoffs to play for anymore. I know they're not technically eliminated, but they'd have to basically go undefeated and I think still have some help on top of that. So does apathy start to set in with this team? Because if it doesn't, not so sure how the Cowboys keep up with them on the scoreboard, given what we have seen from the Cowboys offense over the last couple of weeks. There have been moments, I understand, but you're going up against one of the most potent offenses in the NFL with one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the league this season in Joe Burrow. So to me, that's a matchup that matters because for as much as I know we can get on the Bengals defense and how bad it has been and how it keeps teams in it, I just cannot see the Dallas Cowboys keeping up with Burrow in this offense if they are locked and loaded and ready to go.
Yeah, that was pretty much my matchup that matters as well. Although I kind of isolated CeeDee Lamb against these Bengals corners because that's all that's left of the Dallas Cowboys offense. And again, it's dropped off tremendously since Dak Prescott has left the lineup and all that kind of stuff. But you look at what the Bengals are capable of scoring offensively and, nearly 28 points per game. They're fifth best scoring offense in the league. Dallas is all the way down at 20.7 points per game. And you think about just how much you don't, if you shut down CeeDee Lamb, which shouldn't be too tall of a task for this Bengals defense as much as they've been disappointing this year, to say the least. There's not much else that the Dallas Cowboys can do. I know that Rico Dowdle has been giving them a little bit of life in the backfield, as far the offensive backfield, but it's not enough. Nothing's really working for this Cowboys offense, and I can't imagine that they have much motivation right now either. So it might be kind of the battle of who's less apathetic towards the rest of their season.
Phenomenal for Monday Night Football, let me tell you. Can't wait to watch this game with the rest of the nation. I will say that a guy who is not apathetic at all is Micah Parsons. Like, this is somebody
That's
who
true.
just loves playing the game of football. He's going to go out there and give it his best. And since week 10, 90.9 pass rush grade. He is second in the NFL behind only Nick Herbig, who we talked about
trying to get
already.
paid.
Oh, my goodness.
To get paid.
5.5 sacks since week 10, 18.1 passers win percentage since week 10. Honestly, when this guy is fully healthy, he is one of the best defensive players in the NFL. And how he is playing since week 10, he is building a defensive player of the year resume. He really is. I don't know if he's going to be able to win it because I don't know how his stats are going to line up against some other guys when it's all said and done. But man, he is playing phenomenal. Orlando Brown Jr. really struggled last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, Nick Herbig to bring him up specifically. Amarius Mims was a little bit better on the other side of things, but the Cincinnati Bengals offensive tackles, they're going to have their hands full because I feel like they have all season long, and Parsons might be their best test yet. So they've got to really step up, but I feel like Parsons can be just an absolute game wrecker in this one. And he's really their best chance to slow down Burrow and that offense. What's your plus factor here for Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons is an obvious one, just given that he's got all the singular and personal motivation, because not only does he want to be the highest paid edge rusher in the league, that would mean that he is like the highest paid player outside of a quarterback, which I think actually now belongs to a receiver. It doesn't belong to Nick Bosa anymore. But that's what Micah Parsons is gunning for, and he's going to have a case for it, and he wants to build that case as much as possible between now and the end of the season. So he's got everything to play for, and yeah, you're right. That's the key to stopping Cincinnati, and especially in the red zone. Honestly, that's my plus factor is just kind of the red zone for both teams, like who can punch it in better, because Cincinnati's red zone defense isn't great. Guess who's worse? The Dallas Cowboys. So it's like, who can punch the ball in when it counts, and which defense can hold up when it counts? Again, I don't really like Cincinnati's margin because they rank 30th in the league, 68.42% red zone conversion rate. But the Dallas Cowboys rank dead last, 76.92%, almost an 80% conversion rate for teams. Yeah, that's where I think it's going to come down to.
Like I said, can't wait to watch this game with you all. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be fantastic. Love a good Monday Night Football Dallas Cowboys game when they absolutely will not flex it or change it just because it is the Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys.
They probably should. Week 14. Consider yourself previewed. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to the show. This is a lot of fun to do. We will see you at the same time next week. For Carmen Vitali, I am Trevor Sikkema saying enjoy Week 14, including Bengals Cowboys, and we'll see you right here on the PFF YouTube channel next week for Week 15. See you guys then.